Hello, everybody. I am open to our lecture slides for this week, which cover Chapter 7, Interpersonal Attraction, Close Relationships, and Love. I'm going to attempt to just do some bursts of lecture and walk you through some of these slides. You're going to see that I skip over some slides. I really just kind of want to get to some key points that I feel might need a little more explanation. For you guys. My intent is not to give the full-on lecture in this podcast. And the reason I mainly do that is because all the research shows that students really tune out after a maximum of about 15 minutes. So these podcasts are actually limited to 15 minutes. And I will do my best to give some short ones. And then perhaps you can watch the ones you feel you need a little extra on. And if you don't feel you need extra, you read through the chapter and you feel fine, then you don't have to watch them. So it's really up to you. I just wanted to provide it as an option for some students who are really just needing that extra visual and audio kind of component. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is friendship and how we determine who our friends are. And how we're attracted to other people. Now, this isn't romantic, okay? So we're attracted to other people because they share similar interests and we might want to be friends with them because of that. So this is what we talk about when we're talking about interpersonal attraction. Then we will move into more of that within close relationships and love, okay? So I'm going to start here. Factors that influence our friendships. Maybe you can think about who you've been best friends with. How did you become friends? What chose you to, or what caused you to choose that friend? We think of some of the factors that influence choosing our friends. These are the top 3 in research: proximity, similarity, and attractiveness. So think about those friends for a moment. Who were your best friends growing up? Which one of these factors played a role in why you became friends? Was it proximity? Did you go to school together? Did you live next to each other? Were you on the same team in a sport or an extracurricular? Were you similar? Did you find out you had something in common and that drew you to one another? And attractiveness, which is actually something we don't think about. We don't think about this as a trait that we would seek out in others, but what research shows is we actually tend to choose people who are similar to how we view ourselves in attractiveness as our friends. Interesting, right? So maybe that is something that now that you sit back and you look at it and you go, oh yeah, okay, I guess so. But probably at the time it wasn't something that was a deciding factor on who you became friends with. So those are the top 3. What determines attraction? Well, we all have a need to affiliate. It's a human need. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that leads to self-actualization. I mentioned this when we were covering the chapter on self. We have that affiliation need. We want to reach out to people. We want to form bonds with other people, which is why a time like now, when we're practicing social distancing, is really tough for a lot of people. And we're seeing people kind of break down. We're seeing anxiety, we're seeing worry, despair, depression, fear of the unknown. And what do we need most during those times? People. And unfortunately, we have to keep our distance. So, this just kind of goes to show you that people just naturally want to have others around. And we actively select people whom we'd want to be friends with, who we have that similarity or that proximity or that attraction, okay? And our affect plays a role. When we like another person, it's often because they elicit positive feelings in us. It's very rare that we actively pursue a friend who elicits negative feelings in us, right? So there are individual differences in our need to affiliate, but it's relatively stable as a trait across our lifespan. People will seek out optimal social interaction, right? So sometimes we want to be alone, but sometimes we want to socialize. But when our affiliation needs are not met, they're not satisfied, there can be negative consequences. So things like negative emotions, depression, and a decrease actually in cognitive functioning. We're not as cognitively adept. when we're not affiliating with others. So research indicates that even in people who claim they don't need others, so as you're going to see, people with a dismissing, avoidant attachment style, they still display a need for affiliation. They're still underlying, they need someone at some point, at some time. So also situational influences can affect our need to affiliate. So external events can elicit temporary sort of states of an increasing need to affiliate, or if your mortality is brought into question, right? So things like natural disasters tend to bring people together. Social comparison brings people together. Death really surprisingly brings people together. Anytime we're needing to bond together over a common thing, that's going to increase our need to affiliate. So we also have a different comfort level when it comes to attraction to others. We like those who make us feel comfortable. We dislike those who make us feel uncomfortable. That makes sense. Similarity is going to lead to attraction, dissimilarity not. And mutual liking leads to the most positive emotions in close relationship. Obviously, there needs to be mutual liking for that to happen. This is a photo of my son when he was 4 or 3, and Dr. Camilleri's daughter Milana, who was the same age. Actually, she's a year older. They were little buddies right away. When they were small. And it really was out of, proximity. We were together a lot. So proximity and repeated exposure are two kind of key elements people have looked at. There's no better example than the Wonder Years. Many of you are probably too young to remember this, but I think it is, maybe it's on Netflix, I'm not sure. It's a great show where, boy falls in love with the girl next door. So proximity greatly influences attraction. Repeated exposure, how much we are exposed to another person and exposed to positive evaluations of them, is going to influence attraction. And just being exposed to someone influences that. We call that mere exposure effect. So from a evolutionary perspective, this makes sense because we may be cautious when we're encountering a new person or a new stimulus, but as we encounter that repeatedly with no harmful effects, we then feel safer and feel like that we want to be around it even more, perhaps. So just thinking about like who you live with, who you sit next to, that key element of proximity is likely to draw you closer to that person. And we prefer to obtain extremely attractive romantic partners, but we generally focus on obtaining ones whose physical beauty is about the same as our own. We may have an ideal of who we think of when we think of someone we're attracted to. We have an ideal, but when it comes down to actually picking a mate, we tend to go for one that is similar in attraction as we would rank or rate ourselves. So that's pretty interesting. Balance theory by Heider Newcomb pretty much says people consistently respond positively to others who they perceive as similar to them and respond negatively to those who they perceive as dissimilar. Doesn't that set the stage for the in-group, out-group that we just finished talking about in the chapter on prejudice and racism? We respond better to people who we see like us. That's our in-group, right? And we don't respond well to people who we see as not like us, our out-group. Heider and Newcomb said that we are always trying to strive for balance in that. It sort of relates to social comparison theory, where we're using others as a benchmark to tell us what we think and who we like and who we don't like. If two people like each other but have dissimilar views, there's an imbalance, and changes will have to occur to restore balance. If two people don't like each other, it's presumably the result of non-balance, which usually leads to some sort of a negative internal state, and we're not going to pursue that relationship. Some people would argue, well, what about the saying, don't opposites attract? Yes, that's true. Opposites can attract, but it depends on what we're talking about when we say opposite. We're looking at differences in personality, but only certain traits might apply to that theory. So consider these pairings, right? A dependent person with a nurturing person. Those are complementary. Those are nice. One person is very dependent, loves to be cared for, loves to be, nurtured. And the other one is nurturing, loves to care after, loves to be nurturing. So that's pretty much a good match, right? Versus a hardworking partner and a lazy partner. These are not complementary. They're very opposite and antagonistic to one another. Someone who's hardworking is going to develop resentment and bitterness towards a partner who's lazy, right? An honest partner and a lying partner, same thing. So opposites can attract, but they need to be complementary, and not things that are going to cause conflict and cause that imbalance that Heider and Newcomb were talking about. So what does the ideal partner look like for men and women? This is where we're going to get into talking about what do we find as beautiful. Men and women define different things that they're looking for in a spouse, in a mate, in a partner. This is a picture of me and my husband when we got married. So what does that look like? Everyone's going to have individual differences. However, the research says we do have some things in common when we're looking for a partner. What do we consider beautiful? This was the topic of your discussion, your response homework papers, right? You read the article on what is beauty, like defining beauty. And it's very individualistic, yet there are some cultural commonalities on how we define beauty. Some of it is even said to be biological. When we're looking at physical attractiveness, there are certain things that we, as cross-cultural relevance, define as beautiful. I mean, think of the Miss Universe pageants. A lot of these women are coming from drastically different cultures, yet they all seem to share very similar traits and characteristics in their facial features, in their body types. Some differences, but not really. What does that tell us? It tells us that biologically we are hardwired to see some traits as beautiful. So let's examine that and let's look at that. Beauty can be in the eye of the beholder, but there are some individual differences and preferences. However, there is good agreement when two people are asked to rate a third person. They often will rate similar when it comes to attractiveness. When it comes to women, what we tend to rate as beautiful are women who are quote unquote cute, think Carrie Underwood, or mature, right? Think now I'm totally blanking on her name, but this woman here, right, would be seen as Megan Fox, right? I think that's it. Beautiful in a more mature way, high cheekbones, whereas here it's like kind of like the girl next door, childlike features. We see that as cute. And then for men, being masculine or rugged tends to be what we culturally define as attractive in a man. And there's research to support that. Overall, though, when it comes to beauty, and let's say we saw a different variation of the same face, each one of these is the same face, just slightly different, changed in slight ways, eyes or hair or nose or spacing of the eyes and the nose. We will rate the composite picture. This is like the average of all of these pictures. We'll rate this as the most attractive. So it's like a little bit of everything gets put into the pool of what we see as beautiful. Now, so for the next podcast burst, I'm going to cover a little bit about biology and contrast effect and some other elements of physical attraction and relationships. So if you're interested in that, you can listen on to the next one, but this is the end of this one.